Hi, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Abby Research's series, Welcome to My World. I am Dr. Kristen Donnelly, and this series is honestly just me getting to talk to really rad people about their lives, because everyone's life is a little bit different than mine, and I love learning about other people's experiences, and I think you guys do too from all the comments we're getting. So today I am joined by a colleague and friend, Professor Emory Hoitt, who is working on her doctorate in marketing at Gardner-Webb University. She holds a BS in technical marketing from Clemson and her MBA from Charleston Southern, where she currently works full-time. That's how we know each other. Go Bucks. In addition to her studies and career, she is a wife, mother, and involved in the children's ministry at her church in Charleston, South Carolina. Emory, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
It'll be fun.
This is exciting.
So beyond that very impressive resume I just read, tell us a little bit about kind of what that looks like. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So every day is different, which I love right now. And every day is kind of a balancing act, especially of priorities.
Right.
So, in the bio, I mentioned that I'm very involved in the children's ministry of my church. That's a top priority for me. I absolutely love it. I help teach Sunday school, and now I'm transitioning into something we call preschool praise, which is during a worship hour, and it's just jumping around and singing and telling Bible stories with preschoolers, which honestly has become an outlet for me.
I can imagine what joy.
I know, they're always so happy about life, and it's just such a joy to be around. So that's a big priority for me right now. And then, of course, teaching full time. So this semester, I'm actually teaching 6 full-time classes, and then leading 5 interns. And so thankfully, you're doing most of the hard work with the interns, and I just get to check in weekly.
Actually, they're also a breeze to work with, which we're both grateful for. But 6 classes, and you guys are doing all on Zoom for that? So are you hybrid, where you're in class sometimes?
So I'm hybrid. I'm on campus. 3 of the classes are face-to-face, and 3 of them are online.
Oh my gosh. Do you find as an instructor that requires different things from you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And the online classes are twice as hard as the in-person classes, which I think a lot of people have a misconception about. They're like, oh, you can run tons of online classes, and that's no problem at all. They're extremely time intensive, not only for building the content and the PowerPoints and the checking in, but the way that you lay out the assignments, the amount of interaction that it takes, because when you don't have that face-to-face rapport, building one over email takes a lot longer.
Wow. And you can't build one. So even if you got a student on one-on-one on Zoom, that rapport is different than an in-person rapport.
Absolutely.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. So there's something about physical bodies in the same space that is really important for relationships, especially with developing leaders that are college students.
Oh, 100%.
Wow.
And that's something that's been really interesting to hear from you. We're in the 3rd semester of doing more Zoom classes than ever before, just because of the pandemic. Yeah. But that's something that students are noticing too. That's something that's kind of taken a hit to emotional well-being, is the fact that they're not able to be in physical proximity to people. Yeah. And they feel very disconnected, not just from professors, but socially from each other as well. And so that has been a big effect that I'm hoping we can quickly mitigate in the future.
Yeah. And one of the things that people who are not professors may not know is that you're always sometimes part therapist for students too. It's a dual hat thing. So when you talk about emotional well-being, have you seen an uptick in your need to be like Pastor Hoitt as well? Okay.
Absolutely. And there's some things that, students are going through all kinds of struggles, between losing family members, from being fearful about the job market, from being fearful about the fact that they were in person for all of their classes. Now, all of a sudden they're online for all of their classes, and that has a completely different skill set and study set involved in it. So they have a lot of fear surrounding that still. And then their social circles look completely different. What they're allowed to do looks completely different. Yeah. And so, there's a lot of anxiety that brings as well. And so just talking through that, and right now we're in the midst of advising. And so we're setting up summer and fall schedules.
And you guys are transitioning back to in person in the fall, correct?
Yes.
Because of South Carolina's vaccine projections, it will be safe to gather.
Right.
Right.
About half of our College of Business at this point is fully vaccinated, which is huge.
That's amazing.
And so I know it's really exciting, which means that by June, definitely by July, we should all be fully vaccinated. And so that's, moving forward for fall is looking very promising. But these advising sessions are part therapy, part classes that are taking up. It's a lot of checking in of how are you doing? Where are you emotionally? And how are you able to handle classes? Which ones are tougher for you? But how's life in general? So that has been an interesting addition.
I can imagine. Because you always have like one or two students that's who you like, that's how your relationship is with them. Right. So I had it like one or two a class where it was like, this was a little bit more therapeutic and a little bit more mentory than professory, but I would imagine the proportions are significantly different now.
Instead of one or two, now it's 30.
Got it. And so, I mean, every institution is juggling 4,000 hats, but has there been an opportunity for the institution to provide institutional support, or have you had to look for kind of self-care elsewhere? You talked about the children's ministry and that's your outlet. Has there been like staff support stuff, or have you gone elsewhere to find that release of carrying all of their trauma?
When we were allowed to come back on campus last semester, that was hugely therapeutic for me because Good. My colleagues, we're a pretty tight-knit group.
Yeah.
We were used to doing lunch together, and there would be 10 of us surrounded around a table just because we enjoy each other's company.
Yeah.
While there can't be 10 of us around a table anymore, just getting back into the office and being able to see one or two of them at a time and just have that face-to-face, catching up, checking in on people, that in and of itself was therapeutic for me. Last spring about killed me when everyone had to go home and we were isolated and we, couldn't leave and everything was closed down. So when we started being able to slowly kind of open up and, and fall and go back to the office a little, that was phenomenal.
Great.
So I consider, being in the office
institutional support. Yeah.
Institutional support. Yes.
Obviously. Yeah. So I want to switch gears now because you weren't also a professor during the pandemic. You were a student during the pandemic. So,
yes.
Yeah, because you made the completely insane decision to work full time and do a PhD, of which I just bow to you. I cannot do that. My mental health would not be nearly as balanced as yours is. If I made that decision, which I'm sure wasn't really a decision because in the US and the UK, for people who don't know, Dr. Aaron and I got to do our PhD in 4 years. In and out, done. There were no classes, there were no comps, there was no GRE, any of that. We just wrote our dissertations, did our research, got in and got out, which is a different ballgame than the US system. And so taking off from work for 7 to 10 years is not feasible. So,
right.
For anyone. So how has COVID shifted the balance? Has COVID affected your PhD in how have you started navigating your research and your access to sources and things like that?
So the main difference is my program is part residential, part, they call it independent study.
Okay.
So we meet several times a year face-to-face. Well, obviously when COVID hit, we lost those times. And so we've now missed 3 different face-to-face residencies where it's intense. And it was, during the height of the advanced statistics classes and
times where you really could have used some help to talk things out. And
right. The classes that you kind of really want to be a person for.
Yeah.
And so That's been interesting. I feel like my professors have done a great job picking up on Zoom, but you lose something from not being in the classroom together. You lose something from not being able to kind of walk through problems and then look over at your neighbor just to make sure, like, okay, did I understand that right? Is your spreadsheet looking like mine right now? And then having the professor come and check and be like, oh, this is where you went wrong with that command in the software program, or this is, so not being able to have those types of quick interactions was difficult. But I think the hardest part was one of my professors wanted to completely pivot our entire class halfway through the semester last spring and make it about COVID. And so we had started this long research project, and then that pivot took us down an entirely different road, which meant, okay, now instead of putting in 20 hours a week on a project that we were kind of steadily working on, now we've got to increase that to 35 to 40 hours a week to play catch up to get that project to where our other one was, and then finish out the semester.
In the middle of the trauma of the beginning of a global pandemic. Woof, that's rough.
And dealing with the trauma of all of my own students. Having a 2-year-old at home that I'm sitting here all of a sudden trying to figure out, now that my husband and I are working from home, like, okay, I have a Zoom meeting from 10 to 11. Do you have him then? And then I'll rush downstairs at 11:02 and I'll take over and do lunch. And, just the back and forth of that for a few weeks too was a little insane. But we made it through, and I feel maybe stronger for it. They say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right?
I mean, true. And Kelly Clarkson tells us that. So I think
yes.
This is
the theologian
Kelly Clarkson, because that's not actually in the Bible, by the way. So the point of like how you kind of juggled all of that stuff. Like, we know a couple of things about the pandemic already, that it's disproportionately affecting working moms, especially in emotional health. It's disproportionately affecting women of color, which is not your category, but definitely the working mom category. So it's overall disproportionately affecting women for sure. Mm-hmm. There's only a few of us within the woman category that have escaped the disproportionate effect. And it's pretty much those of us who don't have kids and who have stable jobs. So hi, I'm doing okay. But according to statistics, which, interesting statistics, one of the fights that Emory and Dr. Aaron and I routinely have is which one is superior, quantitative or qualitative? And the true answer is that we need both. But we like joking with each other that Emory loves numbers and we love words, and that's okay, and that's why we need each other.
Absolutely.
But so thinking about what the statistics are telling us is that this has been a disproportional effect. Does that, in your circles of friends and your circles of professional women and your circles of student life, does that feel true? And B, how do you feel you've personally navigated that the COVID of it all?
Well, I'm going to go back to what I said at the beginning, and every day has been different. I would not have survived last spring had it not been for one of my really great mom friends who kind of saw the dumpster catching on fire before I did, because I honestly believed, okay, this is 14 days that we're flattening the curve, slowing the spread, and then we're back to normal. Schools will open back up, like we'll be back.
Yeah, so many people thought.
And yeah, so I was truly the ostrich with my head in the sand, believing that. Like, she was not. And she was like, nope, we've got to find a nanny situation, because she was working full-time as well from home. We had she had a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. I had a 2-year-old. We were a part of the same school that was shut down, and she said, I don't know if this is going to last a month or 2 or 6. And she said, but I don't see the 14-day happening. So she reached out to this just amazing godsend, and Alex was able to kind of join our families and help us during that time, which truly, I mean, that was the biggest lifesaver, because then my husband and I were able to, at least for 4 to 5 hours of the day, concentrate on work.
Yeah.
And there are so many of my mom friends that didn't have that, and they really struggled, emotionally, professionally, physically, because physically it's really taxing.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say it, and it wasn't just my mom friends either. One of my best friends does not have children, and she's a teacher. This took a huge toll on her.
Yeah.
When you talk about pivoting all of your lesson plans, and when, you know, she teaches high school English, when you talk about just moving into a totally different realm, and the emotional distress that isolation brings, like, that's a real thing that I think not just women but men have experienced too. We just hear it talked about more so in women right now.
Yeah, that was going to be a follow-up question would be, do you trust those statistics, or do you think
No.
the stats, okay, you think they're skewed?
Not at all.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's much more, I think it's less gender related and more personality related.
Okay.
I have some friends that were extreme introverts that kind of loved it at first, but then found it very oppressing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have extroverted friends that found it very depressing and oppressing right away, that found ways to kind of navigate it. But for extreme extroverts, it's still hard.
It's been rough.
Yes. Yes. And I think especially not having an added distraction of small children in the home has actually intensified for a lot of my friends.
Okay. Because I mean, all I focus on every day is what I feel like doing, and all I feel like doing is staring at the TV and dreaming of the end of COVID. So right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Oh. And you're not alone in that.
Yeah.
Like I said, a lot of my friends that don't have little people to occupy, you know, their attention, and constantly have to be like trying to figure out their schedules, or, you know, what to fix them for dinner, you know, just silly little day-to-day life things. I honestly believe that the emotional stress has actually been more.
That's a really great point, just because, you know, we've talked about on this channel, and then you and I have talked about this offline, but one of the things we have to move away from is this hierarchy of suffering, and that there are certain people that got this worse off just because they're in a category. And I mean, I do think there are economic disproportionate effects on women and women of color for sure. But I think we're using often that shorthand as like the whole emotional, and you're good to call us out on that, that's not, that the emotional effects of this are not necessarily economic, gender, or race related. They are much broader and more complicated than that. And so we have to learn how to hold space for whatever people's experience was, and not try to compete in the suffering Olympics. And how do we do that? And especially, you know, I think of our students, our interns, who in any other year would be people that would be at the top of the job market, and they'd be, I'm sure, crushing their interviews and doing a great job. And the fact that not only is there this extra anxiety, I mean, everybody has anxiety about getting your first job out of college. Even if you've already landed it, you're often still nervous that you might lose it. Like, it's a thing. They've got this on top of it, and then we don't have the normal markers and rhythms of how college life is working, and they can't do the normal releases, either the celebrations or the grieves. They can't do any of that. And so we're all holding trauma in our bodies in ways that we weren't even this time last year, because there was a lot of people that thought it was 2 weeks. And so we weren't hunkered in for the year. And now a lot of us are skeptical, like when President Biden says, like, oh, by July 4th, the level of skepticism is huge because we've been told 2 weeks before. And it's like, I know that tree. I was lied to before. I will wait and see. Thanks so much. And it feels like hope is a dangerous risk sometimes. And it shouldn't be, but it does feel that way right now.
It does. And, you know, even saying that, though, I do feel like there's so much hope on the horizon. I mean, we are seeing things kind of opening back up, and the vaccines rolling out, and I see so many beautiful pieces of life that have still happened even during the shutdown that I wish those were the topics that we talk about on the news
Yeah.
instead of the death rate, instead of things like this that are just really the things that consume people. Not that those aren't important, because that is important.
But we have to hold attention, the hope. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I wish that we looked at the beauty that happened through it too, because people were actually able to slow down. They were able to refocus. They were able to reprioritize in some ways. Now, frontline healthcare workers didn't get that luxury. And so, and they still haven't been able to slow down yet. However, for majority of Americans, we have had that. And that was a really beautiful thing that I hope post all of this, we kind of still hold to.
Yes, that's my next question for you. So you're looking at normal in the fall. You're looking at a return to normal. I assume Clemson or Gardner Webb is talking about getting you guys back together. I'm sure that's in the conversation. So what are you going to take from this and carry forward into the new normal?
One thing as I started this program, I got really fixated on I wanted to be the best student. And part of that was just proving to myself that I could make it in this higher level of academia, which I realized during the pandemic is so silly.
It's internal imposter syndrome is a hell of a drug, girl. Like it's a thing.
It's so silly though, right?
Yeah. And so it's totally insane, but we all do it. So yeah.
So I was actually really thankful that was one of the lessons I walked away with, which I was like, okay, my relationship with God and my family is way more important. And have I ever stopped to ask someone, what was the GPA of your PhD?
Literally no one. Do you know what they call somebody who barely passed their doctorate? Doctor.
Exactly. And so, it kind of just put things in perspective for me of, yes, I want to do my best in this program, but I don't need to make it my life. I don't need to make it the top priority, because it's not.
Yeah.
And, on the other side of this PhD program, or on the other side of this doctorate program, like, my family is still going to be there. And do I really want to cause such suffering and hardship for them, additionally, from me not being present for things that I could have been, but I was trying to overachieve?
Oh, that's a lot. Yep.
So that was something that I'm still holding on to and trying to balance a lot better. I hope I am. I feel like I am, but I don't know. My husband could answer that more honestly probably than I could.
Well, I mean, the myth that we achieve balance is also a myth. Like balance is really a momentary decision. Like balance innately is a word of motion that we've treated as an inert word. So like balance is a motion word, and that's just how it has to work. But we're recording this on St. Patrick's Day, by the way. And so whenever this airs, know that Emory and I are still continuing these conversations offline. And if you would like to continue them with us, comment below. Please go ahead and do all the YouTubey things, subscribe, like, share this stuff. We'd love to hear your thoughts on how this is. If you are also in academia and you have been dealing with COVID, we would love to hear how your university handled it, because something that we've learned is that every university did it differently, and every university groups of students handled things differently and had different priorities and campus culture and things like that. So we'd love to hear how things worked other than CSU, Gardner Webb, and then I know how things worked at Baylor. And so how we'd love to hear that. Please comment below, and I'll make sure Emory gets your questions if you've got any, so that we can continue this conversation. Emory, almost Dr. Hoitt, thank you so much for joining me. This was a total delight. And
thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. And I will see you guys in the next Welcome to My World. Bye.